Hey friends, I want to start off this episode by saying, sorry it's kind of out of focus for the whole episode. I didn't realize that until I started start editing. So, yeah, next time that hopefully won't be a problem, but I didn't want to have to re-record it. So you're just gonna have to deal with the fact that it's out of focus. But I hope you enjoy, and here's the episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the BrainshartPodcast. Thank you. That's right. We have a name. We have a name now, which is great. And I thought of it in the first week because when I was editing, I realized this entire podcast is just one giant brain chart that happened in a Joanne Fabrics, and you have to sit on it the whole car ride home in the middle of summer. Just one sweaty, gross mess. Anyway, my name is Liv, and welcome. And if you didn't watch the first episode, this is a podcast about nothing. Truly. It's all about stuff that I am interested in, and a lot of people may not be interested in. But you know what? This is for me. Anyway, we're going to start off this episode by explaining. This episode is not going to be like the first one. I mean, it might be, but it's not going to be talking about TikTok trends. It's not going to be trying to be relevant. I mean, somewhat relevant to stuff that's happened in the last week or stuff that's going on. But it may not be relevant to a lot of people. And you'll understand why later, because I'll bring up a topic that probably no one has interest in except for me. And if you do, that's great. Let me know. Let me know if you're like, oh, I've been waiting for someone to talk about this, and I can't find a single podcast that does. Well, here it is. So we're going to start off by talking about my first week of school's icebreakers. I talked about this in the first episode, how uncomfortable they are. And I went through a list of some that I found online. And I had a couple that were as bad as I thought they were going to be. You know, I had a lot of classes where it was just stating your name, stating your major, where you're from, where you're living, and our preferred pronouns, which I think is really great that my school does. We have a policy at our school that we have to know each other's pronouns, and that's something that we do in our introduction, so we make sure we're respecting everybody, which I think is awesome, and I think every school should do that. And I don't know if every school does that, but I do know my school does that. So, we'll start off by going through a couple of my icebreakers that I wrote down that happened to me because there were some interesting ones. The first one that happened was in my French class. We did, again, the regular old introductions, and then we played a game where my professor had a wheel of questions like, do you prefer rock music or classical music? Do you prefer camping or staying in a hotel? Do you prefer coffee or tea? And of course, the question I get, do you prefer the club or the theater? No one else got this question. And there were a lot of repeats because there weren't enough questions for everybody on the wheel. So some people got repeats, but nobody got my repeat. And I had to answer if I prefer clubs or theaters, which I answered theaters because whoever says clubs is... If you prefer club over theater, you need help. Clubs are some of the grossest places I've ever been. There is a good inch-thick layer of sludge that you have to walk through, and the smells, the sweat, the proximity to other people, disgusting. Like, I really don't think the floor that you walk on when you're in a club is actually the floor. I think it's a layer of spilled drinks and God knows what else. And then the floor is like actually underneath that. So of course I said theater. That was uncomfortable and a hard question to answer. Well, actually it wasn't that hard to answer, but it was like awkward to answer in front of my class. Thankfully my professor didn't have me justify why I like theaters more than clubs. That was a huge relief on my part. But it was weird. Yeah, that was uncomfortable, and I'm glad that is over with. I have my computer here because I actually have my second one pulled up. For another one of my classes, I'm going to say this again. We did the formal, regular introductions. But then outside of class, they had us fill out this questionnaire. And then we had to turn it in for points, for a grade. I don't know what they were grading. I think they were grading us on participation because that's hard. So I'll go through some of my favorite questions that I had to answer. Of course, there's like what kind of art we like. I go to art school, if people didn't know. I'm an artist. Oh, I talked about that in the first episode. Sorry. Yeah, so of course we had to talk about like our favorite artist. And then it turns into, what are 3 of your favorite distractions? Which, like, why do you need to know that? Are you going to keep an eye on me and make sure I'm not doing the things that distract me in class? Because I don't know how I would do this. One of my favorite distractions I put was my vinyl player, which I hate to sound like that, but I got a vinyl player from my grandfather, and I have around 50 records from my grandfather, and I use them as a distraction when I am feeling down. Also, sorry for that cut. Yeah. 3 things you hate, which I put the sound of people eating as one of them, because ew. I never have understood the ASMR niche of watching people eat, or mukbangs. They make my skin crawl. The sound of people eating. I'm not an angry person. I would say I'm a pretty positive person. And, I tend to give people the benefit of the doubt, or, when people cross me, I'm just I just let it happen. But when I hear the sound of people eating, I get so angry to the point where I'm terrified of myself, which is really uncharacteristic of me. So don't eat around me, or I might hurt you. I had an ex-boyfriend that ate with his mouth open, and that was like one of the big things in our relationship that I genuinely had thought about breaking up with him multiple times, which I never did. And that wasn't the reason why we broke up, because I had to tell him to shut his mouth when he ate. I had to give him a hand signal when I'm toxic. But it was like a ridiculous amount of opening your mouth when you're eating. Like, my friends, when we would go out to eat with him, would look at me because they would be like, he's a great guy. We didn't end things on a really bad terms. We don't talk, but he's a good guy. And I'm sorry if I'm putting you on blast. I'm not putting your name in here, but you know who you are. Oh, here's another thing I hated. The smell of celery that stays on your hands. When I was in high school, I was like a sophomore in high school. I worked at a restaurant as a hostess. And sometimes I would help clear the tables when we were in a rush because if we didn't have enough people on staff, and it was slow up front, but during dinner rush. And when I would pick up Bloody Marys and put them in the dish pit, for some reason the smell of celery would get on my hands, and I would have that smell on my hands for days, and I can't eat celery after that. I never liked celery to begin with. I don't get it. I don't get why people are like, I'm going to have a nice little snack. Oh, they asked if we collected anything. a lot. I'm a hoarder. I'm just kidding. I'm not. And yeah, so that I could talk about that one and go through each thing that I talked about in that, but it was just weird. It was a weird little questionnaire that I had to fill out, and it made me really uncomfortable. And I really hope that my professors never ask me about any of those things on that list. Let's see. For one of my other classes, we did sort of formal icebreakers and talking about who we were, but then we had to, because it's a games class, we had to play a game where we wrote fewer, none, most, all, and something else on 5 different sheets of paper. Total waste of paper, and it made me really upset. And we had to like write in chat 5 different yes or no questions, and we had to like raise our hands if we said yes. It was really uncomfortable. And then we had to play a game where we got put into groups, and then we played Zoom games, which did not work, and it was horrible. Yeah, so glad that's over. Those were my icebreakers. I'm sorry that was probably really boring for all of you, and I might cut this out. I'll let you know. I want to move on to my next topic because that one really sucked, and it sucked more than I thought it would. The next topic that I want to talk about is a topic that I've been really obsessed with the last couple months, like really obsessed with to a concerning level. And that topic is Laurel Canyon. For those of you who don't know, Laurel Canyon was and still is a place. It kind of died down, and it doesn't exist anymore in California. And this was a place in the mid to late 60s, early 70s that some amazing musicians lived in. Artists like Joni Mitchell, David Crosby, Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, that's where he's from, Neil Young, Cass Elliot, the Mamas and the Papas, and a lot of others. And this, I have watched 3 separate documentaries in the last month about this. I've always really loved artists like Joni Mitchell and the Mamas and the Papas, but I never really understood the sort of influence that they had. And when I came home due to COVID, I started talking with my mom about it, and she started telling me all about this because she grew up, she was young during the time that this was going on, but she was aware of it. And she told me about some documentaries that she had watched. And let me tell you, if time travel existed, I would go back to 1960, I'll say 1967 because that was kind of in the peak of everything. 1966 even, when things were really kicking off. I would go back then to Laurel Canyon just to be able to experience this. This era was like nothing else that I've ever seen. This was like a group of people that just loved one another and shared such creativity and created such amazing, influential music. Like, if you don't like, I'm going to say Joni Mitchell, because anybody who doesn't like Joni Mitchell, leave this page right now. Go. She is one of the most brilliant artists. She made some beautiful paintings. She wrote the most gorgeous songs. Oh my God. But yeah, there's something about this group of people that were able to come together, and like, you look at all these different bands that ended up breaking up but then building new ones. Like, I look at these musicians and they were so just like, if someone left a band for even a bad reason, like, or they were in a band and they met these other people and they were like, oh my God, we worked so well together. The people they were in a band with before would be like, oh my God, you're right. You guys sound amazing together. You need to go pursue that. That doesn't happen anymore. Music is not like that anymore. And that was something that was talked about in this documentary. It was like, I think it was 1975, I think was when this all really ended. And the Eagles, if you don't know who the Eagles are, they are a great, they're sort of like country rock, a little bit, sort of band. They were the kind of the bookend of the Laurel Canyon era. But they talk about in this podcast that once people started leaving Laurel Canyon and people really started to make a lot of money, and it kind of became a more of a money-making grind rather than a sort of community, that sort of sharing and shared love died out, which I think is really unfortunate. And I don't even see that in the art community. I had a glimpse of that when a couple of friends of mine, for a really brief period of time, like it literally lasted like a week. We had one meeting. We created an art collective. I would say I wasn't really a part of the creation, but I was there and I was a part of the art collective. After Trump got elected, there was an art collective created where a bunch of artists got together and we created art. We wrote, we talked, and it was really great. And I really wish that it went on longer than it did, because it could have been something really cool. And I just don't see that. That sort of, there's not a lot of, it's like so individualized now, and so about, I'm going to become famous and I'm going to make money doing this. Whereas when Laurel Canyon was happening, it was more so like, I am creating and it's all about the music. It's all about the music and all about this community. And there was a lot of drama in Laurel Canyon. There was a lot of drugs. There was a lot of, failed friendships, failed relationships, and a lot of fighting, but it was still all about the music. And they would get over the stuff that was going on for the most part between them, and just continue creating because they knew that that was what was good and what made them happy. And I watched a documentary about David Crosby that he talked about, he doesn't know what else he would do without music. Like, he chooses music over everything else. And now I look at these people that I know that are kind of, their career is lifting off as artists, and it's all about the fame part. And I mean, I could say I feel the same way, as it's all about building an audience and all about, I mean, now it's about making money because everything's so expensive, and my education is expensive, and I need to find a way to support myself. And, being able to support yourself comes with an audience and comes with fame, I guess, in a way. But back then it was about creating, and that was it. And it's so unfortunate that it's not like that anymore. Which kind of moves me into my next topic. And this topic works in tandem with what I'm talking about, is the sheer nature of the fact that this was a topic that I wanted to talk about last week, but got cut out because my audio wasn't recording last week. But we are in a space where art movements might not be possible. We look at sort of art movements, like one art movement that I'm really influenced by, which was kind of around the same time, a little earlier than the Laurel Canyon stuff going on, was the light in space movement. And for those of you who don't know what that is, I'm sure you all know James Turrell. He worked with Kanye West and actually has a lot of great pieces that he's making Road and Crater, which Kanye West has helped fund. And we don't stand Kanye West on this podcast, but he did help one of my favorite artists. So thank you for that. But that was around the early 1960s when that art movement started. And I feel like I've talked about this with some friends before, is that we're at a time where our technology is so advanced and so much has been seen in the art world that it feels like there's no room for something new and exciting. Because movements like abstract art and pointillism and even Dada, or which I'm trying to name stuff that people know, and like the light and space movement, was like, these were all things that we had never seen before and had never explored to be an art form. But now we have all of that covered, and we have games, we have 3D modeling on our computers, we have video art, we've got, I don't know, music, I don't know, we've got, I mean that stuff's been around for a long time, but it's so unfortunate because I don't find space as an artist to try and create something that doesn't feel like it's already been done before, and that can be influential in our current times. I mean, there's new topics to talk. I guess there's new topics to talk about, but they all kind of are history repeating themselves. Everything that's going on right now feels like it's just this stuff that we've tried to avoid, but happening again. And it's just unfortunate because I would love to be a part of something new and exciting, but I can't even begin to think about what could be done that hasn't been done before already, or something that we haven't seen at all, whether it be technology-wise or conceptually. And that sucks because I'm sure a lot of people are watching this who know who I am. You're also artists, and I would hope that you kind of feel the same way, because if I'm the only one that thinks this way, that's makes me feel very closed-minded. But I try to be as conceptual as an artist as I can and try to make stuff that is new. But then I look at what I'm influenced by and the research that I do behind my work, and I realize that, like, I'm taking art that, especially art that I used to love as a kid, and kind of making my own renditions of it in a way. And I'm not saying like I'm taking that direct idea and that direct conceptual idea, but I take what I like from all these different art pieces and I go, okay, what can I do taking this sort of silicone modeling and this sort of interactive Arduino, which I don't know why I'm mentioning Arduino because nobody knows what that is, but this sort of interactive sensor or this cool light idea, and like, how can I tie these all together? But then I realized that like I'm just taking stuff that like has already been seen before and kind of mashing them all together, and it doesn't feel new. And I wish I could find that new thing that hasn't been kind of touched before in the art world, which is such a big feat to try and conquer. But it would be cool. But I just keep creating the stuff that seems cool to me, and hopefully I'll reach a point as an artist that I hit this milestone of like, oh, I just created something that like is new and that like has these new technologies in it, which who knows? And I couldn't even think about what that new technology would be. Maybe I'll develop something. No, I won't. My brain isn't that big. But yeah, if you are on the brink of a new art movement, let me know, because I want to join in on that. I want to be a part of that. That sounds like something that excites me so much, because I love art movements. I think they're so interesting and so individualized, and it's so interesting to see like how different each one is and how they're connected to the stuff that was going on in the world at that time. I like art history. I will never study it, but I mean, I've studied it, but I will never pursue it as a career. But I do think it's interesting. And I think that everybody should pay attention to it, because we're surrounded by art every day. I mean, notebook, it's got art on it. Those are my thoughts on that. And I hope that that was interesting to you, because, you know. But we're going to move on from that, because I could talk about that for hours and hours and hours. And I don't want to bore everyone, because this podcast has already been extremely boring, and I'm really sorry. But, you know, we're going to move on to some fun things. So this was the topic that I was like, nobody's going to care about this. Nobody wants to know about this. And that is the Tour de France. This is one of my favorite things that happens every year. And I don't understand how more people don't watch this. So if you don't know what the Tour de France is, this is a cycling race that happens every summer in France. And it's, I believe it's 3 weeks long. I could be wrong about that. Usually it's got around 18 stages. I believe. I act like I'm so educated on this, but things are different this year, and it started later than it normally does because of COVID. But yeah, basically, if its name is exactly what it is. It's the Tour of France. It's a bunch of guys, professional cyclists, cycling through France. And it gets really intense, but throughout all of this cycling, it's like 4 hours long. They will show buildings like chateaus and bridges and farms and cities, and talk about the history of them while we're watching these guys cycle through these towns, which I just think is so wonderful and just so great. And it's a beautiful sport, and it's really good. I just wish more people would watch it. My favorite cyclist's name is Peter Sagan. He is from Slovakia, which my grandfather's from there, so represent Slovakia. I can't speak any Slovak, so, but I do know some Slovak recipes like babajky, halušky, and that's about it. But yeah, it's just, I wish more people would watch this, because it is the most, I've been watching it since I was a kid. It was always on in my house when we were kids, but I didn't start getting like really into it and really understanding the rules behind it and all of the point systems and whatnot until a few years ago. But once I started to understand it, it was so interesting, and it got so intense, because I was realizing like when you start to watch it, you start to realize like body language and understanding like, okay, that guy is he's riding back here in the peloton, riding in this guy's slipstream. So then throughout the race, there's like point markers, like there's sprint markers, which are there's the yellow, green, white, and polka dot jersey. The yellow is the overall, and that's overall time raced. The green jersey is a sprint, and Peter Sagan currently has that. He lost it for a few days, but he just got it back yesterday, so haven't watched today's, so we'll watch that tonight. The white jersey is the best young rider, and then the polka dot jersey is the best climber. And throughout the stage, there's usually sprint markers and mountain markers. So people try to cross those first to get those points, and so they can keep the jersey or win back the jersey or whatever. And you just like, you watch this and you're paying attention to all these riders and the body language of them, and like seeing like, okay, this guy, he's hiding right behind this guy, but that he knows that if he's riding in the slipstream, he's not working as hard. So then when the marker comes, he can slip around and like go through the marker, which it gets so intense and so good. And it's never the same. Like you watch a football game or like a basketball game and it's just, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And don't get me wrong, I've watched basketball before. I got really into it last summer. But I only watched it for the Bucks. Go Milwaukee Bucks. But it's never the same. It's always something new will happen, and it's so unpredictable because these guys are going, like yesterday, a guy went 60, his top speed was 60 miles an hour on a bike. And his chain could have come off and he could have crashed. He could have hit he could have punctured his wheel and really wiped out, or, and Peter Sagan, the sprinter, he is a 7-time winner of the green jersey and a 3-time world champion. And this year it's been really different because he hasn't been doing as well, and he hasn't been able to actually cross the sprint stages first. There's always been one guy. Yesterday he got really close, but a guy like kind of shoved. He should have gotten a penalty for this. This guy kind of like shoved him out of the way, like swerved his bike into him, and then Peter had to like go over. And then there was a great shot of him like talking to this guy after, obviously like upset and mad. He had a couple words with him, as they said. Oh my God, and don't even get me started on the announcers. Oh, they're so good. I'm telling you, I really love this, and more people need to watch it. And hopefully you'll go watch it after this. Go watch some highlights on YouTube. It's really good. The announcers are great. A couple of years ago, one of the announcers unfortunately passed away. He was great. His name was Paul Sherwin. He was really wonderful. And him and Phil... I forget Phil's last name. Okay. So the announcers are Bob Roll and Phil Liggett. Yes, Phil Liggett. And it used to be Paul Sherwin and Phil Liggett, but Paul passed away a couple years ago. But Bob Roll has been a part of the tour for a long time. He actually used to race, and it's so good. Phil has this amazing British accent, and he just like, seriously, I won't be upset. Go click off of this and go and look up highlights right now. It's so good. But it just brings me so much joy. And this year it was postponed due to COVID, which makes sense. It's a very close contact sport, and there's a lot of crowds. And I found out, I think 5 days into it happening, my dad and I found out that it was going on. And when we turned it on, it was just this rush of serotonin that I was missing so much from COVID. It was so good. It was so lovely. Yeah, go watch it. I was going to talk about a couple other things, but I guess I can save it for next episode, which I promise will be more interesting. I just really wanted to talk about a few things that I was really excited about and thinking about this week. And I know that they probably weren't the most interesting topics for people, but so I have to wrap this up because my camera is overheating. Yeah, I was going to talk about the VMAs and how stupid they are. I don't know where it cut off. So we're just gonna say our goodbyes. Thank you so much for watching. If you did, again, subscribe if you want. give this video a like. It would really help me, even though I know this episode was kind of boring, and I'm working on it. But thank you. And thank you for watching BrainshartPodcast. There will be a new video out next week on Sunday. I'm still working out my schedule to try and figure out if I can end up doing 2 episodes a week, maybe do one sort of, podcast, and then do one sort of fun non-podcast video. I'm still trying to figure it out, and it's, again, early. But yeah, thank you so much for watching if you did, and I hope to see you guys next week. I'm going to try and make it more interesting. And I just wanted to thank, and I know he won't see this at all, but Curtis Connor is truly one of the sweetest people ever. If you don't know him, he's got a really great YouTube. I'll link him in my bio. I messaged him asking for advice because I really like his stuff, and he got back to me and gave me some sweet advice on how to kind of find content, which I didn't follow this week because I don't know, it was stupid. But go and check him out because he's honestly like the sweetest person in the entire world and takes his time to help people, and he makes really good content. All right, thank you so much for watching. My camera overheated again, but I'll see you next week, and feel free to check out my Instagram and my Twitter, and remember, go check out Curtis Connor. He's great, and thank you. Ew, I hated that I did that. I really hated that I did that. I'm so sorry, and you don't have to subscribe to me after that. I'm really sorry. All right, bye.